the News Herald.
Angela, it's good to talk to my old stomping grounds.
Yes. Madison probably misses you. Anyway, so what about the school rankings? Kasich administration put in that schools will be ranked from best to worst, and I wanted to, well, how is that going to affect the report card next year? Can you talk a little bit about where the Ohio Department of Education with that is with the school rankings and what's going to happen?
So under House Bill 153, there will be a ranking of school districts and schools by 6 different categories. In particular, I think the ones of primary concern are ranking from order of highest to lowest performance indicator, or performance index, excuse me. There will also be one for expenditures per pupil under rules that are yet to be developed by the department, because this will really take a look at how dollars are being expended in the classroom. So these rankings will be in addition to the existing report card that you get. My intent is to make sure that not only do we make the applications that are called for in law, for whether it's the reteaching of testing of teachers in the lowest 10% of districts, or whether it's making sure that community school sponsors who in the bottom 20% are not allowed to add schools as two instances. But the other key to this is to make the rankings, turn those really into a productive management tool for districts. So if I could break the data down in the performance index and look about, and if I were able to look at my district in relationship to similar districts, say the same kinds of numbers of students, same types of settings, and I could look at how my ranking compares to the rankings of others who are like me. If I find particularly there are some who are outperforming me, I might have some evidence by which to ask questions to see if there are some practices they're engaged in that seems to get good mileage. So if we use the data in ways other than just the rankings, but we turn it as a management tool, districts would be able to see whether or not there are best practices out there that they could engage in and make adjustments so that they could learn from one another as to how they could improve the performance for all their students. The same could be true whether we could do correlations. So could you imagine if we could do correlations between a performance index rating and a per pupil expenditure rating to see who's getting the most mileage for the least amount of money spent? And so what are the characteristics that are going on there? Is it an artifact of the labor contract, or are they did they structure things in a different way? These would at least yield some clues and allow me to ask certain questions to see how I might improve based upon what I've learned about being good practices of my colleagues. So the idea is to buttress and support the regular report card with these rankings in addition to the application of the rankings for the statutory purposes found at 153.
And this will go into effect next year then?
Yes.
Okay. In the room?
Yeah, I just had a question about the graduation rates. In terms of some schools like Cincinnati mentioned, if there are students leaving to go to Kentucky, how do we account for those students that are moving to a different state? And that maybe there could be some flawed data in the configuration of their graduation rate. Is there any, steps that the department is taking to kind of help schools bolster or code people appropriately, or what's being done on your end?
Well, whether the students go to Kentucky or Dayton, the fact is they would depart the district. So our job will be to continue to do what we've done since 2006, which is to provide the guidance to the districts on how to code those students and how to account for them in a way that's consistent with what the formula is asking. And I think probably many districts, so until that actually came into effect, they were probably still focused on doing business the way they had been doing it, but now we have to ask for that change to occur. It'll be in everyone's best interest as we get more precise in our measures.
Okay. From the phone?
This is John Higgins from the Akron Beacon Journal.
Hi, John.
Can you talk a little bit about charter school performance on the report cards, and whether you have a list now based on this report card of schools that would be closed for poor academic performance?
Actually, I don't have that information with me, but it's a valid question. We're just going to have to we'll have to get it to you, John. I just don't have it with me.
Can you just comment in general about how charter schools did on this report card?
So we have anybody here who can do that? I think that analysis has yet to take place. And that's something we will promise that we can get that information back to you, John.
Okay.
What I can tell you in general, however,
the graduation rate, in talking with our folks in Akron, they've always hewed, pretty religiously to the rules that ODE already had in place for coding students, and often took a hit for it because they were often, in the middle of the pack in the Big 8 in terms of graduation rates, but they were pretty religious about hanging on to their students until they were absolutely sure that they had really transferred to another school. Do you think that the wide disparity in the estimated rates this year and the rates that will appear to the more rigorous standard, is that due to, you think, just to improper coding? Because it's not as if the rules weren't already in place, because Akron, I believe they were following them pretty closely.
Akron, if you look at their graduation rate, actually increased. And what they are evidence that when you pay attention to the data and engage in the rules for how we account for kids, that ultimately will come back as a reward to the district, and did so again. It did so this year.
Okay. From in the room?
The implication, does that mean the other districts didn't do that?
Well, I can't really comment on what each individual district is. I think they're all in different places. I'm just saying that Akron has, and we know this from our practice with Akron, that they have been very consistent on how they've managed their data and how they've accounted for their students, and it's been quite consistent with what the expectations have been. Thus, you see, while they may have been in the middle of the pack because they, as you said, they took the hit for doing it the way that we have suggested, they have been rewarded, if you will, because of that consistency.
Yep. Okay. From in the room? Paul?
Yeah, Stan, based on your comment about EVM, the brief tenure of your predecessor, and the normal phase-in of state board actions, would you say these results or these gains are really the result of parameters put in place by former Superintendent Zellman and even yourself and your previous role?
Oh, I think it would be, certainly I can't take credit for my long tenure since July 12th for these results. But this is clearly accumulation. I think as the schools get better, we start with the change over to the standards-based system under Superintendent Zellman. This was continued under Superintendent Delisle. And so it really, though, is a credit to the conditions, the terms and conditions that the legislature and our governors and our previous superintendents put into place. But then it was the actualization of those things to reach these kind of gains that we see in the schools today. What I'll be asking the schools to do is to build upon these successes as we make our transition from a minimum competency system to a college and career ready system.
Okay. Another call, anyone from the call? Another question?
This is Dee at the Inquirer.
Sorry. Let's go to Dee and then we'll go whoever was next there. Go ahead, Dee.
I'm interested in knowing what the state will do specifically with districts that have a predominant African American student base in order to reduce this persistent achievement gap that shows up everywhere in attendance, in graduation rates, and in all the test scores. And it's only going to apparently get worse as the state increases or rises up its own standards and its scrutiny of the numbers. Will the state have any kind of specific initiatives that will be targeting districts that serve that population?
Well, under our Race to the Top program in particular, we have resources that we're bringing to bear in districts that are demonstrating that they have the large gaps or overall have deficiencies. This is a question, quite frankly, of believing that kids can succeed and then making sure that they do. So it is one thing to say all children can learn, but no, if you believe that, then all children will learn. And there will be no failures on our watch because we're going to make sure we take all the steps necessary for children to understand that they indeed do have it within them to learn material and to achieve in ways they never thought were possible. We don't give up on kids regardless of their status. we take the greatest efforts to get the most from them. When we do that, we see results like we saw in this year's report card. Our function is to make sure that we believe that of all children, not just some.
Okay, there was another person on the call that wanted to chime in there for a question.
Yeah, this is Ida from Ohio Public Radio.
Hey, Ida.
Hey, how's it going? So, quick question for you guys. I know you might have addressed this, but I'm just wondering what you attribute to the increase in the overall scores for. I mean, I've heard a lot about data and individual student attention and things like that, but, I mean, if we look at the Cleveland schools, they've had their transformation plan for a year and a half with the same focuses, and they actually dropped in the ranking. So, is there anything that you attribute the better performance to in specific?
Well, the formula works pretty much like this. If one looks at what the academic content standards call for children to know and be able to do, and then they match their instructional strategies to that, and they don't give up on kids so they don't give up on themselves, you can get these kind of results. I think the more years of practice in a standards-based system that Ohio has, our teachers are just getting better at working with the content standards. And so we're going to call on them to take those skills to the next level as we introduce the Standards 2.0 in 2014-15. But truthfully, I really believe, and it's going to vary from district to district and school to school, this is about the relationship that teachers have with students and the ways in which they can inspire students to be better than they ever believed they could be. So matched with fidelity to the content standards, you can get these kind of gains.